And what's going on, everybody? And welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, presented by Inside Arkansas, and hosted by Andrew Ellis. It is a beautiful January 15th, this fine Wednesday. We are now, I believe, 30 days away. I hope I'm not wrong on that, maybe give or take a day. But we are less than a month from the Arkansas baseball season, the season opener against Washington State at Baum Walker Stadium. I cannot be more excited, man. My anticipation, my anxiety is building as the days go by. And after Arkansas basketball's rough performance in Baton Rouge last night, dropping to 0-4 in SEC play, I'm sure a lot of you are just as excited about baseball season and looking for something to get excited about and look forward to. And hopefully this Razorback baseball team can be just that. But if not, you're going to have the best damn baseball show, the Baumbastic Podcast, to guide you through the journey for whatever ups and downs may entail. But again, appreciate everybody for being here. Appreciate everybody who's been tapping in with the show. Really been pleased with the work that we've been doing and pleased with the direction it's headed. And again, I just cannot wait for the season to have real things to talk about. But today, we got a nice little treat. We got a Dave Van Horn press conference. And if you missed that, the full video is up on our Inside Arkansas YouTube channel. You can check that out now. Wait till you're done with this video. We're going to play a couple clips from that press conference and really dive deep into what DVH had to say, what the head hog had to say, State of the Union. And before I begin, I do just want to just really show my appreciation for Dave Van Horn and who he is and just the head coach he's been. And it's been a joy covering him. Like some of my favorite moments as a sports fan have been watching Dave Van Horn. So I've always admired him and looked up to him, and now getting to know him a little bit. You know, we're not BFFs like I claim that we are, but he's always been nice to me, always been good to me, and I always appreciate him for that. But I really appreciate his professionalism and just how he goes about things. Me, myself, like I am a very harsh critic when it comes to Razorback head coaches at press conferences. We've had so many iconic Razorback head coaches at press conference moments, whether it's Bielema with the borderline erotic, whether it's John L. Smith with the smile, whether it's, Chad Morris with the saying he's the guy for the job the day before he gets fired. There's always times where Razorback head coaches are putting their foot in their mouth in front of the media. And really, that's where you dissect. That's where, they speak to the fan base. They speak to the media. That's where they kind of give their State of the Union, and they get to kind of get what they have off their chest. And then it's up to us to nitpick it and decide whether or not we believe what they say. And so, the press conferences, obviously when I was doing my job as a writer, it was a lot more. I lived and died by those press conferences, but I'm always really trying to focus in on what these coaches say and what they're trying to say. And I feel like you can learn a lot about the team, about the coach, about the program by following these press conferences. Like I really do think that's one of the best ways. Obviously watching the Baumbastic Podcast is the best way to keep up with the baseball team, but I really do think you can learn a lot watching these press conferences and really figuring out what these coaches really feel about their team and what they say, what they choose to say. Of course, you're going to have your coach speak. You're going to have some, oh yeah, we love our team. Great chemistry, great energy, camaraderie, all that's great. Every coach does that to an extent, but I feel like DVH doesn't get enough credit for being as honest and truthful and just authentic and just gets right to the point. There's even times where he's been brutally honest. I think back all the time to going into Jacob Kostichak's junior year in his, I guess it was like his post-fall press conference. This is before I was even covering the team. DVH just was like, man, it's time for Kostichak to make a move, man. He's been here for a couple years, hadn't gone great. It's time for him to just step it up and be a guy for us. And Jacob Kostichak did just that. But I've always appreciated DVH's ability to just kind of cut through the weeds and say what he needs to say. A lot of coaches, a lot of times are, making excuses. That's what we always say. They're kind of explaining, oh, well, it didn't go our way here, but we think this will happen and that will happen and we'll be better next year. And a lot of times that stuff is valid and that's all they can say. But I feel like DVH does a really good job of acknowledging issues without making excuses and just kind of saying how he feels and their plan for how they think it's going to be better. And he spoke about that a little bit in his press conference today, some of the reality check that he and the staff went through, and he even outright admitted there were times last year where he felt like him and the coaching staff had an idea that, hey, we might actually not be as good as our record says it is, and definitely not as good as our ranking says it is, but they just kept finding ways to win. And I feel like that's kind of a testament to the program and their ability to kind of overachieve throughout the regular season. But of course, it's led to huge disappointments in the postseason, which he also acknowledged. And he just said, hey, man, the last 2 years have been tough to swallow, but he feels like this team is on a mission. He feels like they have a common goal. He likes the camaraderie, the veteran leadership. All those things are great and fine and dandy. And again, I appreciate him for, just the way that he lays it all out there. I mean, it's like a 35-minute press conference, which you just don't see much for baseball coaches, especially out of season, when we're kind of just leading up. We haven't even had practice yet. And so I think it was cool for him to give a lot of in-depth analysis and insight onto how he views this team. And if you've been watching the show, he confirmed a lot of the things that I've been saying in a way, but he also spoke about some things that definitely surprised me and made me rethink a lot. And if you can tell by today's title, he hinted at something that I think kind of a lot of people glossed over. I haven't seen a ton of people writing stories about it or really making a big deal about it, but I'm going to make a big deal about it because it surprised me. So I'm going to play this clip here. DVH was asked about the outfield, and he was specifically asked about the transfer outfielders and how they've looked, but he mixed in a little something interesting there. I want to see if you guys catch up on it. This is a little bit of a lengthy clip, about 1:45, so stick with me here. But this is what DVH had to say about his outfield and how they're performing so far.
Yeah, I really the guys that really were impressive in the fall in the outfield was Charles Davalin. I mean, he had an incredible fall, and he got big and strong in the weight room. A lot of personality, great attitude, and then Logan Maxwell put on about, 12, 15 pounds since he's been there, getting strong and hitting for a lot more power, but he still is just a really good hitter. You watch his batting practice, he squares up almost everything that comes his way. And so there's two right there. And, we'll see how it goes with the other spot. I mean, Pepe was injured. We've got him working a little bit at first base. He was an infielder coming out of high school, DH, first base, and then Kendall. You look at, what Kendall's done in the past, and he played 50-some games last year with major tears. He's swinging the bat. He's going to hit live pitching tomorrow. And when I say live pitching, against not just batting practice, we're talking live pitching. So we'll see how that goes. But, he's a little bit behind, but he'll get there. And so there's some good options. And then you mentioned Justin Thomas, who's outstanding defender, really good base runner, good arm. And he brings some power to the lineup too, but he can also steal bases, as most of these guys can. So there's going to be a battle there, and we'll be able to match up a little bit, and maybe go game to game early, and then figure out and try to get a starting lineup, hopefully by conference.
So a lot to unpack there, a lot to dive into. Again, a little bit of a lengthy clip, but he went through basically position by position there, and guy by guy, and kind of gave his thoughts. So about a month ago, right before Christmas, when I kind of relaunched this program and we started ramping up the content, one of the first videos, in fact, the first video I did was talking about Kendall Diggs' return and what it means for Arkansas and how it affects the outfield, because I felt like Arkansas had a little bit of a predicament. I don't know if you can call it a predicament, similar to the starting rotation, where you've got 3 outfield spots and 4 guys who I view as locks for the lineup. And those 4 guys, I'm talking about Kendall Diggs, who of course has been in the lineup, been on campus, him, Charles Davalin, the Florida Gulf Coast transfer, who I have penciled in for center field. I don't see any path to anything other than that happening. I really like his game in DVH. That was the first guy he mentioned, of course. Logan Maxwell, the TCU transfer, who has hit over 300 in each of the last 2 seasons, hit 335 last year at TCU. Now he's DH'd a little bit, but he's a guy who I feel like seems like a lock for the everyday lineup. On paper makes sense. I don't really see why he wouldn't be in the everyday lineup. Maybe it's outfield, maybe it's DH, but again, that's a third guy. And then Rocco Pepe, who I've spoken about, a dirtbag, a team guy, really a gritty guy, a veteran who I really like his personality, like the way he carries himself, like his swagger. Hits over 300 at Fresno State last year with 14 home runs. You would assume that's the kind of guy you're penciling into the starting lineup. So then it became a question of, all right, you've got those 4 guys. We all agree those 4 guys right there, or at least I seem to think, those are 4 for sure starters and 3 outfield spots. Obviously, Maxwell's DH before, Pepe is DH before, Diggs DH for an entire season. So maybe it would be just that simple as, hey, move one of those guys to DH. And that very well could end up being the move. But if you noticed, he said they've been working Rocco Pepe out at first base. And he said first base or DH kind of thing. So there's a few layers to that. One, Rocco Pepe has been banged up throughout the fall. He was only able to play in a handful of scrimmages, did not participate in the Fall Classic, did not participate in the exhibition series against Oklahoma State. And so, that kind of opened the door for Brenton Clark and Justin Thomas to get in there with that starting lineup. Of course, with Kendall Diggs also out. And so I wonder if his injury maybe forced their hand a little bit to where maybe they're like, hey, I don't know if this guy really can play every day in the outfield. Do we really want him running, covering ground, all that stuff with his injury? Maybe it's set him back a little bit. Maybe that's been what has led to this decision. But again, I think it kind of comes back to the idea that you have 4 outfielders for 3 spots. And first base is, of course, which, by the way, we're going to touch about the first base battle in a little bit here because there's another clip I've got to play. But first base is kind of the big question mark. And so you kind of just start looking down the line. All right, which one of these guys could move? I actually thought Diggs might be a candidate for that because he started his career as an infielder, which apparently Rocco Pepe did as well. But I remember Diggs was a candidate at third base a couple years ago. So I wondered if maybe they'd be tempted to do that, particularly with him coming off of surgery. But I thought that was very interesting. Rocco Pepe at first base. And again, I'm going to dive more into that battle and see maybe if he's a serious candidate there. But I thought that was very intriguing just right off the bat, which kind of confirms what I felt a little bit. But it was until today, I had not considered the idea of Rocco Pepe moving to the infield. I'd considered maybe DH, which just sounds like it's still a possibility. But I thought that was very interesting. So if I'm taking DVH at his word, which look, it's still early. There's going to be a month worth of scrimmages leading up to the season. And then even into the season, he even said it right there. We hope to kind of have a definitive lineup by conference play. There's a lot that's going to happen. I'm sure all these guys are going to get different chances at different spots, and we'll see Thomas in there. We'll see. The one guy not mentioned in that clip was Brenton Clark. I didn't include the question, but the question was specifically about transfer outfielder. So I'm assuming that's why Brenton Clark was not referenced. But he's another guy who had a fantastic fall, really forced his way into this discussion. So does that maybe open the door for him where, hey, maybe you have Logan Maxwell at DH, Rocco Pepe at first base, Kendall Diggs right field, Charles Davalon center field, and maybe the freshman Brenton Clark goes over there in left field, or potentially Justin Thomas could be on one of those corners. There's a lot of possibilities, and I think you might see all of them, frankly, play out between scrimmages and the early portion of the season. But I was very intrigued by that. And speaking of first base, I said I was going to touch on this battle a little bit here. Here's what DVH had to say about that, because obviously Rocco Pepe now joining that competition, and we had spoken about Kahio Aloy, Reese Robinette, Michael Anderson, and how that battle might play out. Here's what DVH had to say about it.
Say first base?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tryout camp over there right now. If you come to our practices, it's almost comical. I feel like I'm at a summer tryout camp. We got 5 guys working out over there that also play other positions. I could throw a couple more over there. We want to get a hitter over there, but honestly, you've got to be able to field and catch pickoffs and know the bunt coverages. And, you can't just stick somebody up first base because he's a good hitter. I mean, that position touches the ball as, second behind the catcher and the pitcher, for the most part. So they got to play defense. And so I guess to not answer your question, we're not sure yet, honestly. At the DH spot, I mean, there's some good ones there that, if Pepe's not starting, he could DH. Kahio Aloy can DH, got superpower. I mean, all the technology that we have, he hits the ball harder than anybody we have, very consistently, every swing. And we're talking batting practice and that type of stuff. And, you could go left-handed over there as well. And we've got some of those guys. So, again, a little deeper offensive, roster for me to kind of select hitters or maybe even pinch hit or platoon until we get it figured out. And, I always tell the players this, I may write the lineup, but you guys make it. And we try to figure out how to put you in the right order and just go prove it to us. Show us what.
He said, "Show us what you can do." I didn't mean to cut him off there with my my video editing skills there, but another very interesting clip where kind of makes me rethink how I feel about the position. So again, Pepe is really the X factor here, because if he's a very serious candidate to play at first base, it kind of creates a ripple effect that goes to the DH spot, goes to the outfield, and really just the entire order of how things line up. I thought it was interesting that he didn't really talk about Michael Anderson a ton in that clip, because Michael Anderson is a guy, the Rhode Island transfer, who has 23 career home runs, is coming off of a 13 home run season, had a really, really good freshman season. I'm surprised he didn't get a ton of a mention there, especially because DVH, when we asked him in the fall, said Michael Anderson might be their best defender there at first base. And so I would assume he's still in that mix, and we'll see if he's able to make some noise here in these practices leading up to the season. But the vibe that I got, just kind of reading between the tea leaves, and the last time we had spoken to DVH leaving the fall, the vibe I got was that Kahio Aloy was the guy they liked. He was the guy that I projected him to start at first base coming out of fall. He obviously lit it up with the bat, hit about 270, but had 4 or 5 loud home runs, had some doubles, hit the other way, got really hot there. You saw some upside with the bat. And this is a guy who started his career as a pitcher. So if he had a nice freshman year and he's really starting to make some strides now in the fall, you're kind of thinking, okay, they might have found a little diamond in the rough here with Kahio Aloy. I got the vibe that that's who they kind of wanted to start at first base, but they were admittedly a little worried about the defensive side of it because he's still learning the position. Again, I just said he's a guy that entered his career as a pitcher, DH'd all of last year while he was at BYU, hitting the lineup every day, but was a DH. So he doesn't have a ton of experience. I mean, doesn't have hardly any experience at all in the field. And so I think they kind of wanted a contingency plan there at first base. And I felt like Michael Anderson was that. And I felt like Reese Robinette, who they threw over there at first base during that exhibition series against Oklahoma State, we kind of wondered when he was going to join that competition. And he mentioned there in that clip that they could go left-handed. I would assume he was referencing Reese Robinette there, or maybe even potentially Camden Kojal. But I feel like that was kind of their contingency plan, was if Kahio can't play the position and we're worried about the defense, then maybe we'll just DH him and have Michael Anderson play first base. And obviously Michael Anderson's got plenty of experience playing the position, hitting, like you'd feel okay about it. But then again, it kind of leads to a ripple effect where if Kahio Aloy is the DH, then okay, you've got the 4 outfielders. What do you do with that extra guy? And so again, that's why I'm so fascinated by these 2 battles that are now kind of merging into one, and Rocco Pepe represents that. Because look, I hadn't considered it at 9:30 a.m. this morning. I had not even considered one iota toward Rocco Pepe playing first base. All it took was one little offhand comment for DVH to say that. And now I'm like, holy cow, Rocco Pepe might be the first baseman. But I do think, okay, now that we're reassessing these things, I just mentioned that outfield, Diggs in right field or left field, whichever one you want. Davalon for sure at center field. I think that's a lock. If you've been listening to the show, I've been saying that like every episode. Charles Davalon center field, Sharpie it in. That's a done deal. And so then you have Diggs and Maxwell for either of the corner spots. I would also clarify that Diggs and Maxwell at the corner spots, not bad defenders, but Diggs is a converted infielder, not necessarily the most fundamentally sound outfielder of all time. And he's coming off of surgery. So it's fair to wonder, hey, is this guy going to be able to throw, catch, run, like all these things? Maxwell also is a guy that DH primarily at TCU last year. So there's a little bit of a question of like, are you fine with that? Ultimately, like, I think it's going to be okay. I think Arkansas needed to upgrade offensively in the outfield. You've got Davalon, a good outfielder, a good athlete that can cover some ground. So maybe he'll help kind of cover those woes up a little bit. But I did want to point that out, that it's not like the most foolproof defensive outfield of all time if that does end up being the trio. So let's just assume Maxwell left field, Diggs right field, Davalon center field, and then Kahio Aloy and Rocco Pepe at either first base or DH. Maybe you do both. Both those guys are right-handed, so I don't know if there's a platoon situation there. But again, he just mentioned you could go left-handed. Maybe Robinette gets a platoon there at DH first base. Maybe Kojal, like who knows? But I think that general outline is kind of where it's at right now. And it's going to be very interesting. Look, next Friday, 9 days from now is when Arkansas will have their first official scrimmage of the spring in January. So we'll see what that lineup looks like then. We'll see who goes where, and we will definitely give you the coverage. But after listening to DVH talk, I'm fascinated. And I want to know what you guys think. Like when you're hearing me detail this, like, does that sound cool to you? Like, what guys do you think I'm sleeping on here? I mentioned Brenton Clark. I mentioned Justin Thomas. I feel like there's room, especially with Pepe going to potentially first base DH role, for those guys to get in that outfield mix now. It's going to be fascinating to see it all play out, and I can't wait to dissect it. But ultimately with the lineup, like, there's really not a ton of questions to ask. Like third base, Bern Iredale, done deal. Shortstop, Vahiva Aloy, done deal. Second base, Nolan Souza, done deal. Catcher, Ryder Helfrich, done deal. And so there's really not a ton of like different variables to dissect here. I really think it's going to come down to where do you put Rocco Pepe? I said Kendall Diggs was kind of the X factor in terms of the ripple effect of where you put him decides everything else. But now I'm starting to think it might be Rocco Pepe, who again, I feel like is a lock for the everyday lineup. We'll see if that ends up being the case. I guess if there's an area of concern for me, it's that I don't want them to go through another season where you don't settle on a definitive lineup until April and potentially May. Like, I just really don't want to endure that again. I hope they figure out a definitive group and kind of roll with that. And maybe you platoon one spot. Maybe there's a little bit of a mix and match here and there based on matchups. I'm fine with that. But I don't want this to be a thing where we're going into conference play and we're like, who the hell's playing first base? Who the hell's playing left field? Do we have a DH? Like, I don't want to be asking those questions. And he kind of hinted there at the end. He feels like they have a deeper offensive group of skill sets to kind of pick through. He doesn't view it as necessarily a problem, and I don't necessarily think we should either. But it's going to be fascinating to watch it play out. So let me know what you guys think. How do you feel about these battles that are set to play out? And we will continue to react to them. Before I let you guys go, though, I do want to make one more call for questions. I know we've seen it come, but some people have been asking about defenders and certain things. There's some questions that I'm going to get to for sure, but I wanted to just issue one more call for questions. People that are, wanting to know what you want to hear me talk about, what you want to hear me discuss on the podcast. And another question I want to ask you guys, live episodes. I really want to start ramping up and doing some live episodes. I've considered maybe going live after Friday's scrimmage next week. The scrimmage would likely be at around 2:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon. So, maybe we'd be going live at about 5:36. Would that interest you guys as a Friday night? Not a good time to do a scrimmage, but I want to know if you're interested in the live episodes and what your ideal time frame would be. Feel free to be selfish and just be like, hey, I do this, this, and that. So this time period would be good for me. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Like if it's overwhelming, you guys want to have like evening streams, morning streams. Obviously Monday through Friday, 12 to 1:30, we do Inside Arkansas Live. So that's going to be a little bit tough, but I want to hear what you guys have to say, because I definitely want to start mixing in some live chat episodes where we can all just get together, shoot the shit and talk baseball and answer questions and all that. And I definitely want to do it once they start scrimmaging, to really talk about the scrimmages. And you guys can kind of, ask, oh, what'd you think of this? Or maybe if you attend the scrimmages, you can hop in the chat and be like, I was at the scrimmage today. I think Rocco Pepe sucks. Like, whatever the case may be. I want to do that. I want to start getting this as more of a community and all of us getting together and talking ball, because that's what I love to do. And I know you guys appreciate that as well. So give me your feedback. When would be a good time for me to be going live and doing the Baumbastic Podcast live? Other than that, guys, didn't want to take up too much of your time once again, but I appreciate you guys for being here. Make sure you like this video. You subscribe to our channel, even hit that notification bell if you really want to stay up to date and know when we're going live, know when we're putting out videos. Make sure you're, if you're not subscribed already on the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever the case may be, leave us a nice review. Make sure it's 5 stars. Make sure you have nice things to say about us. But again, appreciate you guys for being here. It's been another beautiful edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. I will see you guys tomorrow.